recording. And there we go. Welcome to Friday session. Usually we're going to use these Friday sessions as sort of come and go, drop in one-on-one help, small group help, that sort of thing. You can break the group into breakout rooms if we want to do little one-on-ones and whatnot. And occasionally I'll use it for something sort of more tutorially based. But for the most part, I'll let you know if that's going to be the case. You can assume that these are going to be sort of one-on-one supports and answer the questions that you have and help you move forward in the course type of sessions. And there was only one thing that I kind of wanted to go through today with regard to actual tutorials, because I think most people are moving through the Code HS stuff pretty well, and I've tried to help some people troubleshoot some stuff through email, and that seems to be going well. And we can continue doing that in that fashion as long as you're comfortable with it. But one thing I wanted to note about Code HS, and I'm just going to share my screen here and go to Code HS. 1 second. Guess I should share my screen as well. It might help. So I created with my personal account just a student, so I can see what it is that you're seeing without all the teacher stuff in the way. And inside the Comp Sci 30 class, most people are working in basic Java, and I just wanted to note something about user input and getting expressions and getting data from the computer. Now, what Code HS is doing, the way that Java works, allows you to import a whole bunch of semi-built-in libraries, and which are just essentially functions, methods, all sorts of things that people and developers have created over the years and made things called packages that can be installed or accessed through your Java console. But you can't kind of add them all in by default because there's just so many of them, and Java's been around for so long, and so many of these packages have been developed that it would just, it'd be unnecessarily adding in millions and millions and millions of pieces of data for maybe the 5 that you need. That means that you have to tell it what you want to import, because your program, if you don't, and if they didn't sort of design it that way, it would get bloated very quickly, slowing down, using more resources, all the sort of stuff that we want to avoid when we're programming. And the way that Code HS's interpreter or compiler, I guess it is built, is that it kind of has its own packages installed, and some of them are a bit custom and don't work quite so well with other integrated development environments, or maybe other websites where you're trying your code, and you may be trying things that work inside of Code HS that don't necessarily work with another interpreter, whether that being one or integrated development environment, whether that be one that you've downloaded like NetBeans or Eclipse or BlueJ, either on the downloaded version or on a website interpreter that you may be using to access some of those other features like code completion and debugging sessions and things like that. And one of those for sure is readInt, and also readline, and anything that's basically got read in it. It's a package that's been installed and you can't see it. It's kind of happened behind the scenes, and you don't necessarily have this on your version or whatever version you're using. So you will note that if you try to take code, specifically from, I'll just take this little section of code here. Oops, this little section of code here, and if I take it over to an online interpreter, in this case, I'll use that one that I like to use, OnlineGDB. If I take this chunk of code over to GDB and I try to make it run, you'll notice that, run it, let's try it. Oh, so probably have to tell that I'm using Java. So it's compiling it, and you'll notice you get all these errors here. It doesn't know what these things are. It doesn't know what read int is. It doesn't know, like, even if I just copied this inner chunk and went back to sort of whatever the default was for this interpreter and plug that in, you know, we would just sort of expect it to work because it works in CodeHS. But we're going to get errors here, and it's because it doesn't know what read int is. It doesn't know what some of these things are because it doesn't have the proper package installed in it. So I just wanted to make note of that because you may run into some difficulty if that starts happening. And in doing that, I think it makes sense for me to introduce to you the scanner utility, because you're going to find that once you move outside of CodeHS, and if you do any Java programming on your own, or in different development environments, you're probably going to end up using the scanner utility to get input from users as opposed to the read int, next line, read line, things like that, read double. Those don't get used as much in Java anymore for a bunch of reasons. A lot of it's become what we call deprecated. It's stuff that originally used to be installed and work with Java, and libraries kind of relied on it, but they found better ways to do it. And industry standard has become different, so it's not used that much. So this is good for teaching the basics of input and how to use input and store input and variables and whatnot. But I think it's important that I introduce you to the scanner utility, because that's more likely where you're going to be accessing these things in the future. So what is the scanner utility? I'm just going to go to the screen where I've got one kind of dialed up here. Okay, so I mentioned that there's these packages, basically libraries, that you can install on within your program, and what it does is it goes and it imports functions, methods. We call them methods during class, but things you can do inside your program that are sort of pre-programmed in ahead of time, so you don't have to create code to do all these things yourself. Somebody's already done it. You just need to use it, so you have to access it, which means you have to import something. And the two most common imports when you're dealing with input and output and data would be importing Java, and then IO is just short for input. That's the name of the library or package. And then the star means that I want to import everything from java.io. So it's a large library, but not so large that it's going to slow down your computer or add an unnecessary size to it. So by using the star, you import basically every single method and option inside that library. If you don't want to do that, and if you want to make your program just as streamlined as possible, instead of the .star, you would put in whatever it is that you're using, perhaps something called data input stream. And then it would just have access just to that one method or that one function that you're going to use in that library, and it doesn't bother importing all the rest of them. But again, I mean, most people just put a star when we're playing around with it because it doesn't take up a whole lot more space or memory or make your program slower or more inefficient. And the other one is utility. When I use input and output functions and methods, I like to use the scanner, and that's it's a common one, and it is in a different library. It's in a different package, not in IL. It's in util. So that's just short for utility. So you import java.util, and then again, just .star. I'll bring everything in, even though I might not need everything. Okay, so now we're down here in a public class main, basically just an open class that I can do whatever I want inside it. I've got a public static area here. Sorry, my brain got paused there. Dunbar exe failed to advance. And the first thing I've got in there, if you're going to use the scan utility, is you need a line that says scanner, and then this is a name. This is basically a name you're going to use to access any of these methods, and you can call it whatever you want. So I'm even just going to call it my my object or something like that. And what it is the class. I want to explain this in a way that doesn't tread too much on areas that we're going to explain in the future or go through in the future with regard to creating classes and using objects and things like that. What it does is it basically creates an object, which is just a digital being, a digital thing that you can use to get input and get output. It's required if you're going to use the methods that we installed or the things from the library that we installed from utility. So scanner is the way of telling this library, I want specifically the code designated as scanner, which includes all the instructions that it needs to get the input from the user. So I'm saying, hey, access the code for scanner, okay? I'm going to make a thing. I'm going to make an object called my object. Could have called it whatever I want. And this is just the way that you do it. You say it equals new scanner. So basically that's just saying, hey, you know that code I told you to go get? This object is going to be a new object. My object is just being created right now. It's a new thing. It's a scanner. And then you need to do system.in in brackets. And that's just telling Java that this is a system command, and the in means I'm getting input. So you remember when we're printing stuff, we go system.out, and that's going to do the output, which means it's going to show the user whatever you want to do when you print a line. It's going to show the user. And if you had system.out something else, maybe it shows you a picture or a sound or something like that. So it's basically very similar to what you've seen when you're using a print line. It's just you're going to get input this time instead of output. So that's just the stuff you have to import and have in your main code just to be able to access this. But because it's such a common way of getting input, I think it's important that you maybe understand this now, as opposed to running into it later. If you're using what you know from Code.hs, which is great for learning, but then you try to take the exact code and make it work in a different development environment, you're going to run into some of these errors, and that's probably going to cause a little confusion and heartache. Not that you can't get around it. You know, you've got Google, you've got access to Stack Overflow and other forums to help you. But if we get this out of the way now, you'll have a better idea of how to manage the input and output process in the future. So I've created a called scanner. And now I can use that object to get stuff and store stuff. So I'm just going to make a very simple program that asks me for my name, and then it asks me for my age, and then it prints out. I'm going to use this scanner object that I created in order to make that process happen. So we're going to do things from this point very similarly to what you would have seen on Code.hs, but we're just going to use that my object instead of using readInt and readString. So the first thing I want to get is I want to get the name. Now the difference between this this process and the Code.hs processes, we're actually going to do it in two steps. So we're going to print something out, and then underneath that we're going to have another line of code that gets what they print in or what they type in. So instead of it all being in one string, it's actually going to be in two lines. But again, the scanner object is very popular, and even though it takes two lines of code to get your input instead of one line, you can still use it in different less likely to cause errors. So what I need to do from this point is quite similar to what you see on Code.hs. I need to first create a string, so capital S string. Remember, strings have a capital. Whereas several needs to access the string class, which is a capital S. By the way, if a lot of this stuff that I'm saying is kind of sounding a bit confusing because you're new to the terminology and the words like classes and methods and things like that, don't panic. It'll come, and you'll find as you go through the Code.hs materials, all this stuff will just really start making sense. It's very much one of those kind of light bulb things where it just so much at once, and I don't know what all this means, and then there's a point in the course where kind of the light switch goes and you go, okay, this is all starting to come together now. So my message is always don't panic. We'll get there if you're not there yet. String, and I have to name the string, and I'll just name it name because that's what I'm looking for. So the string name is going to be equals to, and this is where it gets a little different. Now I want to use the scanner tool in order to get the input instead of the readInt or read line. And what you have to do is you have to refer to the object. Okay, so my object and then you can use dot notation to get whatever it is they typed in. So this is going to be next. Is next string exist? I can't remember actually. Sometimes it exists and sometimes it doesn't. I just got to check here. It's next line. Okay, so it's next line, which I believe is similar to code HS. I think it was read line. So now it's just next line. And then you just leave this section blank. Don't forget your semicolon. And then that should get me a string, or should get me whatever they type in, and make sure it's a string, and then save it in the variable name. And then I'm going to get an int because I'm going to get their age. So I'll just call that int age equals. It's very similar from this point. My object dot, and then instead of next line, I believe you can do next int on this to make sure that it's grabbing an int. I want to use that data. I want to print out for the user. Hello, blank, you are blank years old. One thing I forgot to do actually is I've set the scanner and I've set the string, I've set the age, but I haven't actually given the user any prompts. So I need to give the user some prompts so they know what. Print ln. Now, print line automatically takes it down to the next line in order to get the input. So you can use that if you want them to enter their data on the next line. If you don't want to do that and you want to have, say, just a colon, so they put their data into the sentence you printed out, you would just use print instead of print line. So you can use print or print line based on how you want it to look. I'm actually going to use print for this because I want it to appear beside the line that I'm typing. So system.out.print, and then just as you would normally would, you'll just have your quotes and then a sentence. So what is your name? And then I'll put colon and a space, and then I'll put a semicolon, obviously. Then they're going to get the input and store it. The program's going to get the input and store it. Now I'm going to have something similar here to get their age. So I'm going to go system.out.print. And then I'm going to say, what is your age? And then I'm going to have a colon, semicolon, then the computer or the program gets the age and stores it in the integer age. And from this point, I can use those variables and the data stored in them whenever I want. So now I'm just going to print out what I said I would. So now I'm going to use a print line statement. And remember, we've got these built into this interpreter that I'm using. And oh man, I just need to check something. Am I actually recording this? Okay, I am good. I had a moment of panic there where I thought maybe I wasn't recording what I was typing in, but it looks like I am. So I'm just going to use the print line snippet that's already built in there, just so I don't have to, I make sure the syntax is correct and I don't risk making any errors and it takes less time. And I want to string together, which means I want to concatenate or add together a whole bunch of chunks of text and data here. And we just use the plus sign for that. So system.out.println, I want to combine everything together. So I'm going to say hello, comma, and now I need the name. So I put a space there just so there's a space in it. Now I need plus sign to concatenate. And now I want their name, and I know I stored their name as the name variable. So hello, whatever your name is, plus, and then more quotes, and another comma, hello, comma, name, comma, and then a space, okay? You are, and then I need the age. So I've got UR space and my quotes, another plus sign, and I want to add their age, whatever stored in the age variable, and then I want to finish my sentence, so another plus sign, more quotes, hello, name, you are blank, and then I'm going to go space, years, old, period, and that should be the end. So I've strung together 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data there. The string says hello, comma, space, whatever the name they entered is, and then comma, you are, and then space, and then the age they are, and then space, years old. So you combine all those things together, then at the very end, we should have a nice output sentence that says what we want it to say. Check the semicolons, make sure everything's right. I mean, I did put a space in here. I could put a comment in there. Back up. And hopefully we don't get any errors. If we do, hopefully they're easy errors to fix. It's running properly so far because it's asking me what is your name. Now you notice the blinking cursor is beside statement, what is your name? That's because I used the print command instead of the ln or print. Okay, then I'll hit enter, and now it's going to save that, and it does that behind the scenes. Obviously, we're not going to see what the program's doing. Hello, Brennan, you are 43 years old. As proper grammatical structure here would not need the first comma. I would just say hello, Brennan, comma, you are blank years old. I'll run it again just to check. Make sure I can put in a space. What is my age? 43. If I want to break it, I can try to put a decimal in there and then hit enter again. And then it says, hello, Brennan Dunbar, comma, you are 43 years old. So that's an example of how you would use scanner to create an object. So this object basically contains all of the things you can do with a scanner. And one of the things I wanted to next line, and I also used it down here, my object dot get the next integer. Now I just actually going to test this out and see if it breaks when I put in a double. If I say I'm 43 and a half, which I am, I'm Brennan, and my age is 43.5. Okay, boom. Exception. Exception is basically the computer's way of saying error. If you were in my computer science 20 class, you would have noticed that we used exceptions and try, and we'd use the try except command in order to catch errors so they don't break our program. Well, we don't have anything like that programmed in right now. And that broke my program. So if I wanted to allow int doubles, I would have to change this from next int to next double. And that should fix the error because now it's looking for a decimal. Next. Of course it broke. I'll do what we always do here. Scanner, next double. I have to parse that somehow. Should be able to use next double. Did type in a decimal, didn't it? That should work. I don't know why that's not working. Lossy from double conversion. Oh, aha! One of those semantic errors, one of those tricky ones where it's just so simple and I was looking at this part saying, well, why is that not right? Why is that next double not right? That should work fine. Well, it was because I said this has to be an integer. I changed the next int to next double, but I forgot to change this to say now the variable is going to be a double. So it was telling me you've got an incompatible data type. It's a possible conversion problem, which means, hey, you told us that you want to make it an integer, but you also told us that you will only take in a double. So that's why it broke. Now it should work. Name, Brennan, what's your age? 43.5555. Hey, Brennan, you are 43.555 years old. So I'm actually glad I made that error and tested it because that's sort of something obvious that once you find it, or if I actually would have read the message more carefully, I would have noticed right away that, oh, I was asking for an integer, but I required them to type in a double. So those obviously data types have to match up there. So that is that's how you import packages and libraries into Java, and that's how you use the scanner utility, which I think is certainly much more popular in Java development than using readint and things like that when you're inputting data or if you're getting data from a file or something like that. So now you've got two options. I don't know if the scanner utility will work inside of code HS. It might. Let's just have a look see. What's going on here? Public class name. Oh, the CSP area. Main Java class area cannot be cast constant program. Oh, it's got to extend it as well. Okay, sorry. Don't worry about that. That's all just stuff you don't need to worry about. But I do need to import java.util.star, and then we'll see if this code, that's not right code, something else. That's the right code. So let's see if this will now in. Losing my place here. See if this will now work inside of scanner object. Scanner object, blah, 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 WTIL. Okay, so let's see if it works in code HS. It might not. Util.star. Try to put a semicolon where you need one. All these little syntax errors I'm making because I'm used to working in Python. And my age is 45 and a half. 45 and a half. Okay, so scanner will work inside of code HS2, as long as, just don't forget, you got to put the import statement at the top, and you've also got to have that little chunk right there where you create an object to use. So you can use the utility package, you can use the scanner class and object and methods with the scanner class. And so if you're testing things out, you can test them out both ways. And I think it's checking. Most of these are checking the outputs. I don't know if they're necessarily checking the way that you get your input. It would probably be a good idea actually to practice using the scanner utility with this, because again, it's something that you're going to see a lot in the quote unquote real world. I'm going to check the output and see if code HS is actually checking what we're using for input, or if it's just checking that the output is correct. So I'm just going to check that right now. I want to ask the user to input a width. So first thing I'm doing is, it says, what is the width of the rectangle? So I want to make sure I've got that. And then I've got the next line. And then the next thing I want to ask is, what is the height of the rectangle? Space there. And then my input or my output should be the area of the rectangle is all that jazz. Okay, so first line. The area of the rectangle is, and then I need concatenation. Change my variable name so they match what they want. And I can't remember, these ones have to be doubles. So once again, instead of string, this needs to be a double. Match everything up, and then the my object needs to be the next double, not the next int, but the next string. So double, 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 double. Okay, good. So the area of the rectangle is, then we need width and height. And then we've got to concatenate that with space units squared, and that should match the output that they're wanting, unless I've forgotten, spelled something wrong, period, end quote, and bracket. All right, so I'm just going to test it, and we'll see if I made a mistake. Width is 40.0, height is 10.0, area of the triangle is 400 units squared. I think that matches the output, so I'll check the code and just see if it's gonna say your output matches, or if it's gonna say you forgot to use the read int or read double or whatever. So it's running all these test cases right now to make sure my code works. Running relatively slowly today, and then it's going to pop up errors if it doesn't like the way I did it, even though the output might match. that's taken a long time. Whenever anything spins like that on a website for that long, I'm just going to copy this code just in case I've got to completely refresh the thing. I think I probably do. All right, we knew it ran, so that's all good. What we're not sure about is going to accept the output. I am not connected to a hard line right now for internet, an Ethernet hard line. I'm connected by a Wi-Fi, and our Wi-Fi is kind of notoriously unreliable, so I don't know if that's why this thing is chugging for so long. There's the add fractions one here. I'm just going to type it in here, place the code ahead of that, and test it quickly, and then we'll import it. We'll see. Class area extends. So programming. It's not class area anymore. It's add fractions. This matches this, right? What's the width? 30.3. What's the height? 32.3. Area is 696, so it's still working. Will it check that code for me? Seems to be the same thing. It's just kind of churning when it's doing the test cases. It's not spitting out any errors or anything. So that is one of two things. Either my internet's really slow, I'll test this when I'm attached to a hard line, or it wants you to use exactly the methods that they've got in the lessons, which is also fine. Again, it's a good way to learn about how to how to set your program up, how to get input, how to assign input for variables and use them and whatnot. But again, I do want you to be familiar with the scanner utility. So I'll test it later on a different machine and see what the deal is. But if you're getting the same sort of problem that I am, that if you use scanner, that it runs fine, but it doesn't test the cases properly, then that's fine. You just use what they recommend. But I wanted to check to be sure. Okay, so let's just assume for now that it doesn't like it because I didn't use their way of doing it, even though it runs perfectly and gives the right output. We shan't worry about it. I think that's all I want to cover today, and we'll carry on Tuesday. If anybody's got any questions, be happy to answer them. And if not, I will bid you adieu over the weekend, and have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Make sure if you have any questions or if you need a little help bumping through any of the lessons or projects, you let me know. All right, have a good one.